The number one mistake that bands make is to think that they can outsmart a system. Like, they think, well, if we get involved in this sort of professional way of doing things, a sort of mainstream way of doing things, like if we get an account, if we get a manager and a booking agent and a record label and a promotions person, a public relations person, and we pay all of these people to facilitate different aspects of our career, somehow we can outsmart the pure mathematics of that and keep our heads above water. And that system exists to support itself. It doesn't exist to support the bands. So that's the biggest sort of business mistake that bands can make, is to think that this system, that they can just sort of jump into this system and somehow avoid what appears to be pure mathematics, that money comes in one place and then it gets spread out to all these other people who don't actually earn the money. They're just doing things and charging a tax in the process. The way to avoid that is to do as much of the administration and as much of the sort of support for your band, doing as much of that yourself as possible, because then you're keeping all of the money and you're keeping control of all the decisions. You won't ever be in the position of having someone make a decision based on his self-interest rather than your interest. I guess in almost every circumstance I'm more comfortable doing something myself than I am asking somebody else to do it. So I would say it applies almost completely. I work in a recording studio that I built for that purpose. I work in other studios when asked to, but I do all my own engineering. I tend to bring my own equipment, so a lot of my own equipment with me. Within the band, Shellac, we do as much as we possibly can ourselves, and I still feel like doing things yourself is valuable in its own sake, because it teaches you more about the circumstances that you work in, and it teaches you more about all the different aspects of your existence. I've also tried to learn from other people's mistakes. Like, I've seen other people do things and seen how much trouble it is for them to do it that way, and I've tried to come up with solutions to those problems that didn't have the same drawbacks. Make everything about your existence as a band comfortable and sustainable and pleasant. You should enjoy it. And if you find yourself doing things that you don't enjoy because you're obliged to do them, then you've made a mistake and it's too late. You have to be conscious of that stuff and not make those mistakes. It is possible to teach yourself basically everything you need to know, but it does require some studious nature. Like, you have to read, you have to take notes, you have to experiment, doing your experiments in coordination with your reading, so that you're not just randomly farting around. You're learning or reinforcing your learning. Somebody might want to use a song in a movie, for example, and in the conventional music business, that's seen as a money-making opportunity. Like, oh, they want to use our song? Great. How much money do we get? And for us, it's more a matter of, they want to associate our band in some way. They want to associate our band with their movie. And unless that's an association that we're comfortable with ourselves, then there's no incentive large enough for us to want to do it. We'll just carry on working at our day jobs for a while and make money and pay rent. We don't have to use music as a tool to generate money. I think that's an option that's open to everyone. I think everyone could treat music that way. It's, in a way, a hubristic presumption to think that you can be purely a musician and that the rest of the world will pay you for the privilege of hearing your music. I think that's a little bit naive in some cases, and grossly overstating your importance in other cases. And in any case, it makes it harder for you to do things that you're comfortable and happy with if you have to use your art as a way of generating your income. Then you're inexorably linking your lifestyle and your personal comfort with the decisions that you make for your art. But I see music as something like, say, skiing or painting, something that you can enjoy doing for its own sake, and you should. Very, very few people should expect to do it professionally. Very few people should expect to do it as a career. And most of the tension within any artistic endeavor comes from a mistaken presumption that anyone who wants to can be a professional artist, and that's where a lot of discontent comes from. A lot of people's dissatisfaction with how they're treated comes not from the fact that they weren't treated fairly, but from the fact that they carry expectations about how they should be treated. And the easiest way to avoid that disappointment is just to maintain a realistic perspective on music or art or whatever it is that you do as your creative expression. You maintain a perspective on that that allows you to enjoy doing it. Like the obvious example is, if you have a booking agent and he can book you a series of meaningless shows playing in places where nobody particularly wants to see you, where you have to make really long drives, but he can get reasonable money for those shows, then he will book those shows for you, and you will be obliged to play them, and you will be obliged to go through all the hassle that it takes to do them, so that the booking agent can make his commission. In the process of doing that, you as a band may not earn any money at all. You may not be playing in front of a sympathetic audience, and you may not be helping your situation in the slightest, but you're going through the motions. You're pretending to do these things for the sake of somebody else. Whereas if you book your own shows, you book your own series of shows, you can play in places where people will be receptive, where that you'll be playing in front of a sympathetic audience, and you can organize the tour in a way that's not going to be too tiresome for you. If it's a passion first and foremost, you will enjoy it and it will be valid. And if you expect it to be your job as well, eventually I think you will come to resent it in the way that most people resent their jobs. That's just one example. The other obvious examples are things like trying to get more attention for your band by having publicity people trumpet your band and try to get attention from other people. Doing that costs money, and it doesn't generate any money. It generates publicity, which does not necessarily translate into money. So you're spending money for the sake of having yourself thrust under people's noses. And as a consumer of music, as a fan, when a band is sort of thrust at me in this fashion and wiggled in front of me like a severed head, then it makes me hate them. It makes me less sympathetic to whatever they're trying to do. If you can learn the same lesson by horribly disfiguring yourself in a fire or watching somebody else be horribly disfigured, I think it stands to reason that if you can understand somebody else's mistake and not make it, you're ahead of the game.